Good morning, good evening. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing, we wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The silver light shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you listening on the Life Online Radio Network, we welcome you in. And we'll be appearing twice weekly on the Life Online Radio Network from now on. Once in our usual Saturday slot, and we're going live on Tuesday evenings at 2200, that's 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, until 23:30, 11:30. So 10 o'clock to 11:30 Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday nights, we're going live. You can reach us at Silverlight Live on Twitter. If you want to respond, get into the game, ask some questions, we'll be there for you. For those of you listening on YouTube, we welcome you in. We'll be probably sharing that same episode live on YouTube just to see the response we get and to make sure the interface and everything is working. Just to give some extra content to everybody around. Now, as those of you know, we think of ourselves primarily as a show of the paranormal. As a show of things that not everybody knows about, things that go bump in the night, as I like to say. We're not really a political show. I mean, politics happen to everything. Politics ruin relationships. Just saying the wrong thing about politics can get people not to speak to you. However, it's awfully difficult to ignore the elephant in the room these days. And it's so just and proper that the elephant is the symbol of the Republican Party. This is a long lead in to the subject of the show, but follow along with me. I'm sure you're going to find it's an interesting ride from point A to point Z. We know the election was recently held, as chaotic as it was, and right now there's all sorts of challenges going on to challenge the rulings. Various states are hand-counting ballots. The Supreme Court is doing their due diligence to go in and find out what they can do to make sure everything is as accurate as possible. Which is good. I like to see the fact that they're trying to make sure the counts are good. For those of you who remember the Gore-Bush election, Gore was declared the winner, and suddenly they realized the next day they had Bush. And as I've said several times on this program, it often comes down very close. And I was right once again. The actual vote tallies, while the Senate seats were far apart, the popular vote was like 52% to 48%. It was within a very, very small amount. Spread over 360 million people, that's a lot of votes, but still, it doesn't mean a lot overall. Unlike his predecessors, the 45th President of the United States has refused to resign amicably. Some people might see this as a crying shame, but I look at it as a very interesting opportunity in the democratic process. See, unwittingly, by fighting to try to stay in office, Mr. Trump has triggered a very interesting set of events. Since the courts are looking into the constitutional validity of the election, that means they're going to take their time. Everybody knows courts don't rush. They take their time. They examine evidence. They challenge. They go into every single detail and see what's going on. My prediction is they're going to do exactly that. Mr. Trump, the Republican Party, the whole United States can wrap itself up in these court trials being fought at multiple different districts at multiple times, from the bottom court structure right up to the Supreme Court, and you know there's going to be an appeal. I don't know if anybody forgot, but there's a little problem of the world called a pandemic, and courts aren't really keeping a regular session going. So this makes things even more complicated. Appeals that would normally take time are now going to take scads more time, whether it's lawyers not being able to get into their offices, whether it's Whatever the case might be, it doesn't matter. The fact is, it's going to take time. But the president cannot stay in office past Inauguration Day. So the interesting thing is, if the courts all strike Donald Trump's petitions down immediately, case closed, whatever, we get Kamala Harris, a minority female representative in the vice president's position. Which, congratulations, good for her, hard-fought victory in the election. I got no issue with this. But if Trump continues to hold his appeals and the election is not validated by the courts, then a very interesting dynamic of the United States Constitution kicks in. If there is no available person to fill in the roles of president or vice president, the Speaker of the House becomes the president. And that, my friends, with the election results for the last election for the House, which is not being contested, would be Nancy Pelosi. So, Nancy Pelosi, being the Speaker of the House, if Donald Trump continues with his lawsuits and cases and protests and refusing to leave, she automatically becomes the president. So, no matter what happens, barring some ridiculous statistical impossibility, we're going to have either a minority vice president as a female or a female as a president. I don't think Mr. Trump is doing this out of the good of his heart. He's doing this because he's serving the Trump brand. He wants his name to be remembered. And he might even have this in the back of his mind of saying he was the one to put the first woman into the White House. But knowing Donald Trump, I don't think that will come up. He'll try to take credit for it, but his real reason is just to stay there and stay in power. It's hard to give up power. As I said on my documentary on Donald Trump, that's really what he's after, power for himself and his family. So any altruistic veneer he tries to put on it afterwards is simply false. But Kamala Harris is a wonderfully qualified individual. Nancy Pelosi is a wonderfully qualified individual. I really have no problem with either one of them being in the White House. I think both would be fantastic. But the problem is, it's a hollow victory. Almost every other nation on the planet has had a woman in their head office. They've had a minority woman in their head office pretty much everywhere. So the United States is really about 10, 15, 20 years behind everybody else, which always tends to be a problem with the United States and race relations. There's this other problem that comes into the United States, which is the fetishization of the first. Now, remember, they're trying to push Kamala Harris as the first minority woman. Double victory. You see, they want to burn those terms into your head. First minority woman. And if Miss Pelosi gets in, first woman president. And remember, it's all about being the first, even though it isn't necessarily the first. Kamala Harris would not be the first minority vice president. There's a gentleman named Charles, I can't even read my own writing here. Charles Curtis. Now, he was a member of the Kaw First Nation. They're also known as the Kans, and as a matter of fact, they're the ones that the state of Kansas is named after. He was a Republican vice president under President Herbert Hoover, and this is back in 1929 to 1933. So, the last minority president, 1933, was 90-ish years ago until we get another minority person that's even pushed for the office. This is a frequent problem in our society. We go so long between these events that they're forgotten. Why did it take 90 years for another minority to take a stab at office? Yes, Mr. Obama had his time in office, and it was a good time. I think he was a wonderful president. Once again, remarkably qualified. Nothing negative at all to say about him. And Kamala will probably do a very good job. But again, why is it taking so long? From Mr. Curtis, 1933, to Barack Obama in 2008, no minorities were really in contention. Serious contention anyway. That is a dismal track record. Just dismal. And it reflects all over society. I mean, this week, also in the news, they're announcing a nice young lady, a brilliant young lady, is all I can say, Jeanette Epps. She's going to be the first lady to be on the International Space Station, also known as ISIS. Or it used to be known as ISIS, until that terrorist group in the Middle East started going by that name. ISIS is wonderfully symbolic. Isis was the name of the Egyptian goddess who reassembled her husband and gave birth to Horus. And when I mean reassembled her husband, I mean literally picked him up and put him back together from being split into 12 pieces. And it's a big part of Egyptian mythology. And Isis is also known as Ishtar when you do the translations. Ishtar we've run across a few times, and she's one of the most powerful goddesses in any mythology. She has a presence worldwide. The archetype of a strong female with a will of her own continues throughout the world. Whether you want to look at the Disney cartoons with the Disney princesses of Mulan being the warrior, or I get them mixed up in my head. I'm sorry, Disney is not a big portion of my headspace. I'm aware of its existence, but the fact is, female warriors and females doing great deeds are an essential part of our culture. If you go back in archaeology in Keitel Hayuk, which is a city in Turkey from about 8,000 to 9,000 years ago, we find that there was a cult dedicated to a goddess and a bull. The goddess seems to be the one that was in charge, while the bull, of course, represented fertility, just as the bull always does. In Europe and around the world, there are figurines that are called Venus figurines. Venus, of course, being another name for Ishtar. And they're chubby women. Let's say that they're little statuettes, and basically this was the Neolithic form of pornography. They didn't have cameras, they didn't have paints, they didn't have much, but they had their will, and they could make a representation of what they thought the perfect woman was. And that's where these Venus figurines come in. They're objects of worship, they're the objects of fetishization, but it shows, going back almost as early as we can in the archaeological record, that the idea of a powerful woman who has power over life and death exists. So Jeanette Epps, this powerful woman who will become one of the Star Walkers, one who walks with the gods, because space is where the god lives. Look at your planet names. Jupiter, king of the gods. Saturn, Jupiter's father. Mars, god of war. Venus, we just talked about Venus and Venus figurines. The god of love and beauty. Mercury, the messenger, because it goes so quickly and it stays so close. Uranus, Neptune, they're all gods. So when we send somebody up to the space station to live there, it almost fulfills Genesis with the Tower of Babel. We are intruding on the realm of the gods. Because somewhere in our heads, we have this idea that the men who go into space are gods. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, wherever they went were celebrities. Just mentioning the name Buzz Armstrong, most of you probably know he was the second man to walk on the moon, because he's certainly the most vocal. Neil Armstrong, I don't know why he was the choice to go ahead. And apparently they flipped a coin in the cockpit, or they decided it literally on the way down to touchdown who would step out first. Neil was a quiet man and stayed quiet his whole life. Whereas Buzz Aldrin, did I call him Armstrong? I'm sorry, it's Buzz Aldrin. My apologies. That's probably why you're questioning my sanity right now, which is justified. But Buzz Aldrin, who's the second one, was the one who went out and did all the talks, all the lectures. He went at all the circuits. He went after the money, whereas Neil Armstrong just sat at home. Which is a shame. I mean, but that was his personality. He was known as being very cool under pressure. And for whatever reason, when it came down to play paper, rock, scissors in the cockpit of the Apollo command module, Neil won it over Buzz. And that's why he is remembered as the first person to step on the moon. But the second one did more work in popularizing the fact we went to the moon, we should go again. And he's still, to this day, saying, I think he's holding on until we send the next mission. Which is a laudable goal. I mean, everybody needs a cause sui project, something that makes them unique, something that makes them stand out. And if that's his, I salute the man. Getting back to our recent astronaut, Jeanette Epps, who, I shouldn't say recent, soon to be astronaut. She is an incredibly qualified woman. She has her PhD in aerospace engineering. She's actually refined the data on how to launch a capsule into orbit, how to do all this orbital dynamics treatment, all sorts of incredible things. I do encourage you to go online and look at her because her resume is beyond compare. She's a minority woman. She's a black woman, an African American, as they like to say in the United States, because they have to be politically correct. I just see her as a very, very talented woman, an incredible person. But there's something rather peculiar when you dig into her life. She's working at NASA, yes, that's true, but she also did extensive work for the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. It's not uncommon for the CIA to work with other organizations. The SR-71 Blackbird, the CIA worked with the U.S. Air Force because they both had slightly different versions of the airplane. And ultimately, they wound up crewing them together. Some would go up with CIA crews, some would go up with U.S. Air Force crews. But the SR-71, for years, was at the forefront of cooperation between the branches. Now, NASA, the North American Space Administration, is not a civilian agency. It pretends to be. It's tried to send up school teachers. It's sent up all sorts of people on board its shuttles, on board anywhere it can get its room. It sent them up. But the joke has always been NASA stands for never a straight answer. And this is always true. Because they are part of the United States defense establishment. Now that the Space Force has arrived and being put together, if it manages to last the next couple of years, because with a new president, whether it be Biden, whether it be Kamala Harris, whether it might be Nancy Pelosi, they may choose to roll its responsibilities back into the Air Force, or they might see the merits of having it. It's hard to say which it's going to be because no one has commented on it. And with the advancements in technology that we've had recently, women like Jeanette Epps would be very valuable to have with online orbiting experience. I'm not saying prepare for an alien invasion. I'm not saying worry about asteroids coming to hit us. Definitely it's something we need to think about. But the same token, having people who understand space and what to do in space only means more innovation will take place here on Earth. Anybody who has had a child or has been around a child understands that to teach them something, it's always better to have some instruction and then give them hands-on learning. Now, I am not accusing Jeanette Epps of being a child in any way, shape, or form. Again, this woman is incredible, and to achieve being an astronaut is mind-boggling. That being said, she is a more advanced child than the rest of us. I've never been in space. I've never flown in anything other than a commercial airliner. Actually, I have, but I was very young and it didn't go very high. But she will be able to sit down with Boeing, with SpaceX, with all these people and be able to say, when you're in orbit, this happens, you feel this, you need to think about this. All these things that you only get from experience. And she's going to get that by being the first woman to live on board the International Space Station, ISS, taking her place among the gods, as the first minority woman at the space station. The only problem is, she's not the first minority woman at the space station. She's the first one to live there for a long period of time. Back in 2006, there was another African-American woman named Joan Higginbotham. Now, she wasn't just visiting, she was there on board the space shuttle. And as a matter of fact, her special area of expertise was operating the Canadarm, the big arm that goes around and helps construct the station, because in 2006, they were still building the station. So while, again, I salute Jeanette, who has a PhD, Joan only had a master's, and although she had about 3 of them, it's always confusing for me to see this woman who was there first, who helped build the thing, get 0 credit, and Jeanette Epps get credit because she's staying there. It would be like ignoring the architect who built the building in favor of giving photo opportunities for the film star, the movie star, whatever star it happens to be, who moves into the place that the other one built. Now, I'm not saying Jeanette Epps is going to have an easy time and can kick back. Life on the space station is pretty stressful, but she is not the first minority woman to be there. And you can bet your bottom dollar, Joan Higginbotham would have definitely had a walk around and a tour of the place while she was building it, because why wouldn't you? If I had built a new submarine, I brought you on board, you just wouldn't climb into the first deck, look around and say, hey, this is great. You'd want to see the little nooks and crannies. Oh, this is where you sleep. Oh, this is where you wash up. This is where you cook your dinner. All those things. You're going to want to see that because, hey, how many people can say they've laid eyes on it live? We've seen it through the televisions, but seeing things live is always more validating, more personally meaningful. And also, it's a heck of a lot of fun to say, hey, I was there when it was new. But again, it comes back to this culturalization and fetishization of being the first. It's not too much fun to say Jeanette Epps is the second minority woman to stay at the International Space Station. And again, they're using word trickery. Whenever they want to get a pop from the audience, whenever they want to get you excited about something, they change the wording. Words are power. It was always believed to be so. The original people who could write were believed to be powerful wizards and sorcerers because they would be able to record information that other people couldn't remember. It was a kind of sorcery. And the exact same is true with us. We still use this sorcery today. Politicians do it every day just by slightly altering a word here, slightly changing pitch. They can change the tone and meaning of what they do. I think the Oriental languages like Chinese, Japanese, etc. really exemplify it because with them you can change the entire meaning of a word just by its tone. I'm not an expert in these languages, believe me. I'm more the Western language guy. But at the same token, I've tried to learn them, and I find them endlessly fascinating. But it tells you a lot about human psychology. Just changing a tone can really change the meaning of a sentence. By saying Jeanette Epps is the first to live on this International Space Station is true. Joan never lived there. She had her own berth on the space shuttle, whereas Jeanette will be living there full time for months to come. The curious thing is she was supposed to go up, I don't know whether it's still in place or not, on the CST-100 Starliner, which is Boeing's product, not SpaceX's product. This is one of the first manned missions to go to the space station. That, to me, would be fascinating. Why they aren't talking that up, I don't know. Whether she's on the Starliner, whether she's on a Dragon capsule, whatever she's going up on, that would be what I would focus on. Not just the fact she's going to live there, but she's the first to take this up. And the reason I say that is because I'm looking at these 80-year time periods between things happening, and the Starliner and the Dragon capsule programs are both brand new. Let's get eyes on that. It'll make people think it's more special. Whereas highlighting Jeanette as the first person supposedly to go to the International Space Station just makes it seem ridiculous. I mean, you look back in history, and the 1960s is where I kind of start my civil rights clock. Because we know the 1960s were turbulent. So if you were born in 1960, okay, for the first 10 years of your life, things are a little bit weird, but they kind of settle out in the 1970s. When you're first starting to get, say you're born in 1960, so 65, 66, you're getting into school, things are starting to become desegregated, things are starting to become more mainstream. And by the time 1970, you're 10 years old, you see people going to the moon, and you're being told anybody can be president, anybody can be prime minister, it's a free country. 1970, you might actually start believing this. So let's fast forward. By 1980, you're now looking at your what you're going to do, whether it's going to be a nurse, a doctor, a PhD student, a master's, whatever you choose to get. You can start thinking, I'm really good at math and science. I'd love to be an astronaut. And you would have a reasonable shot at getting into the astronaut program, because by the time you graduated there, it's 85, 86. The shuttle missions are in full swing. They're looking for qualified people. So that's why I artificially set 1960 as my civil rights liberation. Anyone born after 1960, in my opinion, had at least the essential qualities they needed to make something happen. Not all the opportunities, but the ability. We're supposed to have equal opportunities in North America, and such things simply don't happen. Everybody starts in a slightly different place in life. Everybody ends up in a slightly different place in life. That's unfortunately the way things are. But why did it take so many years to get any black person into space, much less a black woman? I mean, to go from Joan Higginbotham in 2006 to Jeanette Epps in 2020 is 14 years. 14 years in which we're regularly sending crews up to the International Space Station, left, right, and center. And, like I said, my artificial deadline of when I call civil rights beginning still says in the 1980s and 1990s, there should have been a lot more minority people in general in the space program, in defense industry, in every single walk of life. You can open up your phone book. Well, nobody looks at the phone book anymore. Who am I joking? Google search of your area will show you that minorities own businesses, and they make pretty darn good money doing it. There's no difference between somebody who's of any skin color. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I was lucky that I grew up in a school that was integrated. So differences were just simply not there. You looked across, you saw Kevin, you saw Delra, you saw Lennox, you saw Indranil, whoever it might be. Their skin color simply did not matter. And since before I was born, This is supposedly the lesson that we have been taught. So the question becomes, why are these glamorized firsts so few and far between? And the answer is, not everybody gets to be an astronaut. But also not everybody gets to be a top fashion designer, top rap artist, top heavy metal artist, top writer, top anything without a lot of luck, a lot of hard work, and a few breaks. Jeanette would probably have a very fascinating life story if I dug into it, but the fact that she's worked with the CIA in technical intelligence tells me I'm not going to get to know much about her. Because my own military background was in communications. I was an infantryman, but I specialize in communications. And I can tell you that there's blacked out portions of her dossier that no one's ever going to get to see. It would be very interesting, though, to see what a CIA technical intelligence expert is going to do in the company of Russians, Japanese, and all the other people, Europeans, who are involved on the International Space Station. It's kind of a dream when you think about it, to have a CIA operative in the central hub, because the Russians send up the Zarya Unity module, which holds everything together, and she's going to be there firsthand, and she can take months to study it, if there's anything that essential for them to learn. I'm sure both the United States, the Russians, the Europeans, the Japanese, everybody has their own little listening bugs on board the space station. Not just to hear conversations, because the spies never really stop. They're listening now. They're always listening. And that's why I truly believe the International Space Station is probably one of the most heavily bugged places on the planet. This would be good, and I'm sure this is how they justified it to their governments. We put a couple listening devices on there, and if something goes wrong, we'll be able to listen in. But they're listening to everything because on board the International Space Station, everybody has a rank. There's no real civilians up there at the present time. Now, of course, the Russians aren't going to sit in the American module and tell them the latest about the Su-34 and Su-35. They're not going to say such things. The Americans aren't going to be talking about stealth on the F-22. But in their own private quarters, people get to talking about things, and intelligence experts are wonderfully trained. They're trained beyond our imagination to pick up on little details in conversation to be able to infer things. Remember what I said about politicians, how they're masters of manipulating the language? Intelligence people, especially the CIA, are incredibly talented, after all the work they put into it, on deciphering that language. A Russian cosmonaut can say a lot by not saying a lot. You might simply be talking about an event back home which might not be very significant. For example, the current tense situation with Ukraine. Yes, it's blowing up again. The Russians and Ukrainians are starting to shake their swords, and Ukraine doesn't have a chance, but a very good analyst might be able to tell what a person thought about that situation just by the way they refer to it. And that was kind of Jeanette Epps' job. Before she became an astronaut, she was a CIA asset. And I'll bet you money, dollars to donuts, that the Russian crew members of the International Space Station also have their connections to the KGB or its successor organization. Some of the Russian astronauts might actually be leftover KGB agents, just like Vladimir Putin was. Again, nothing unusual. Pretty much any nation would do it. If China came along, I'm sure their astronauts would be versed with their intelligence agencies. If a British astronaut went up there, he might be MI5, MI6, whatever it might be. But again, we're back to this idea of a cultural fetishization of the first. For many years, it was pointed out in pop culture that Star Trek had the first interracial kiss between Uhura and Kirk. Supposedly there was another one before that, but at the same token, this was, oh my god, in the 1960s, you have a white man kissing a black woman. It's supposedly the first, but it's happened many times since. Again, we're in 2020, not 1960. Things should change, and they have changed. Just not enough. The problem that we have is not enough minority people are seeing themselves as being able to qualify to be astronauts. They might see themselves as a doctor. They might see themselves as an astrophysicist, like Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's not the first black physicist, but he's one of the first black physicists that popularized everything on TV. Now, again, did you see how I had to stick handle around the issue to put him into first? He's not the first black guy on TV to explain physics. He's a very charismatic and a very knowledgeable man, but he's not the first by a long shot. But it's important to try to pretend like he's the first, because the one who's the first gets all the glory. This idea of being the first, I'll give you another example. In Ontario, this was back in the 90s, I believe, women were all up in arms. They were protesting. They were rallying all over the place because it was unfair that men were allowed to go without shirts in public, whereas women were not. On this point, I 100% agree with the woman. However, what happened is they went through all the court challenges, they got the law struck down, and it was legal for women to go topless like men. You know what happened culturally? Nothing. Nothing. Men are still going around without their shirts, and women are going around with their shirts on. Great battle, great victory for civil rights, but no one's doing anything about it. In culture lately, there's this disturbing tendency that I see to change all the male characters to female characters. And I think this does a great disservice to fictional people to be gender swapped. The new Doctor Who, Jodie Whittaker, she's a fantastic actress, and I think she does a good job slipping into the Doctor Who universe. And the reason is Doctor Who is defined by its ability to change. It's been referenced before, going back as far as Tom Baker in the 1970s and 1980s, saying a woman should take the part next. That's how long this sliver has been there for Doctor Who. They've always hinted at it. They've teased it many times before, and they've finally done it. And I think this is actually good, because Doctor Who is an alien. So it can be anything it wants to be. It's essentially a very different show. Star Trek did it a little bit with Jadzia Dax, I believe it was, where they showed in the same episode where the symbiote transferred from one person to another person, and that way it went from man to woman. Great. It's alien. It's not really what human is, but it did explore an important issue which was not being discussed of the day. Where I start to have issues is this more modern tendency to say, oh, we have problems getting people out, we have problems getting people to buy our stuff, let's just gender swap them. For example, the new James Bond coming out is going to be a woman. I don't particularly like this because the broccoli theory and the broccoli family has been behind all the canon James Bond appearances. So from Dr. No straight up to, whatever the new movie is, the one after Spectre. That's what I know for sure. And Daniel Craig is hanging up the mantle, and they've promoted an actress who's going to take over the mantle of 007. Now, some of you are already thinking, well, that's fine. They're all different 007s sharing the same code name. No, that's not true. The Broccoli family has always said, whether it be Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton, Daniel Craig, all of them are the exact same agent. So by suddenly doing a gender swap, you've just turned 60, 70 years of canon on its ear. And for no other reason than to say, we did it first. I would support her. I would even support a James Bond spin-off where James Bond retires and you have her as 006, 005, one of the other 00s that we've always heard about that always have a very short life. And to have another successful James Bond, you can have a mini Avengers franchise going there with the two agents. Sometimes they share missions. You can have them cameo in each other's films. You're doubling your revenue at that point. Because, a gender swap can be done right. For example, when Battlestar Galactica did it with Starbuck, changing him from a man to a woman, Starbuck was not really a character in the public consciousness at that point. There was a couple Battlestar Galactica fans like me that were left over from 1978, and we were excited to see it. But James Bond is James Bond. The books are called James Bond. The series is called James Bond. And now they're switching the series entirely. It doesn't work that way. Like I said, the Doctor Who series, you can do it because he's an alien. But let's take Superman. If you gender swap Superman, you get Superwoman, or Supergirl, or Super something, but it just doesn't work. Batman. If you gender swap him, you get Batwoman, Batgirl. Again, this has all been done before, but it's no longer Batman or Superman. And that's just very simply because that's the way the characters appear in our minds. Iron Man, they have him set up perfectly to come back either as oh my goodness, I can't remember the actor's name at the moment. That's horrible. Robert Downey Jr., that's it. Either as Robert Downey Jr. or as his daughter. And his daughter could be Iron Child, Iron whatever. She can adopt any identity and still seamlessly flow into the universe. But just having Pepper Potts show up in her Iron Man suit and declare that she is Iron Man, you could get away with that. Would feel a little bit forced. She would fit the character so much better another way. And this is why I have such a problem with this fetishization of the first. And here's where we're going to come full circle. It's not because I don't like women. It's not because I don't feel the struggle of the LGBTQ community. It's that instead of taking over popular culture icons, of forcing labels onto people so they can be the first to do this, that, the other thing, maybe it's time to let things be more organic. Minority people know the opportunities that they have and the opportunities that they don't have. And that's why they don't necessarily gravitate towards scientific study. They might decide to be an accountant because in 4 years you can become an accountant, get a pretty good job, and get out there and earn. Whereas deciding to be an astronaut is a lifelong commitment. And the same is true in popular culture. Once you become popular in popular culture, you kind of have to stick to that formula. If you want to change the character, you can do that, but you're changing what a franchise is. And it's better to either spin it off and or turn around to Amazon and look at the millions of books being published there every day with any manner of strong female, trans, lesbian, bisexual, gay, whatever characters you want. Go on Amazon. There's somebody there that's got a book that's just right for you. I specifically wrote a book about a female character, and it was always in my mind a female perspective on the Jack the Ripper killings. And writing in the 18th century, I knew I couldn't have her... I could make her smart, but I couldn't have her stand out as a doctor. I couldn't have her stand out because there were so many restrictions on women at the time. It wouldn't make sense. I'd be breaking with historical precedent. So I made her her own character. Annabelle, in my novel Blood, is a strong woman who puts up with a lot of things from other people. And when she discovers the central mystery, she doesn't shy away from it. She goes right into it. Well, she does try to avoid him at first, but that's simply because she finds him very distasteful. I'm not saying Blood is a perfect book, quite the opposite. I have many things I would change about it, but it's been published for 2 years. And this is the way that I think. I think of character development. Annabelle, to me, has a lot more character development available to her as a woman in the 1800s than would a woman in the 20th century. Annabelle has to work harder. Annabelle has to work smarter, because even though she's quietly reading the medical textbooks behind her boss's back, she still can't show she knows too much because she's a woman. And in the 1800s, women were there to take notes and to basically fetch your tea. That's all they were considered good for. And again, to me, it's a more interesting storytelling opportunity to say this minority person, sexually different gender, non-binary gender, I think that's the correct term, non-binary gender person is suffering from all sorts of crazy stuff, and these are the obstacles they have to overcome. And that's the way it is, but no, we still have to go back to the old favorites and fetishize the first. I'm going to pick on Bruce Jenner, or Caitlyn, or whatever you want to call her, because Bruce Jenner was not the first person to go through a sex change. Not by a long shot. And they celebrated Caitlyn Jenner like she was a hero. She was actually up to be nominated Woman of the Year. And I mean, there were so many other women deserving of that honor. It was disrespectful to all of them. Now, when Bruce was Bruce back in the 1970s, he didn't just come up with this idea. He didn't just decide one day that he wanted to become a woman. This was a carefully thought out decision. It's one thing to go up and dress up in drag, and or a woman to dress up in men's clothes. There's no harm done. It doesn't mean they're thinking of anything other than they're thinking, hey, this is a different experience. But Bruce had probably been playing with this idea, I'm going to say at least 10 years before he became Caitlyn. He certainly wasn't the first, but the way you hear Caitlyn talked about in the media, she was celebrated as if no one had done it before. Well, by the time Caitlyn had that surgery, I'd known a person who'd had it done in the 1990s. And it's very painful. It is, first of all, they have to go in, change your hormones, then they have to shave your Adam's apple down. Yeah, can you imagine that surgery? Where you're strapped down and they're hacking away at your neck to get rid of your Adam's apple. And this can potentially cost you your voice. Then there's the hair extensions, there's adding things and removing things, which is about as far as I'm going to get into things, because Saturday night prime time and YouTube, I don't want to lose my accounts. But it's still not the first person, by a long shot. And again, I go back to it. You can pick any person you want. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual. And they're all going to have firsts somewhere. Maybe they're going to be the first person to win the Iditarod, which is a dog race. First trans person to win the Iditarod. Fantastic. Okay, now how about the first black trans person to win the Iditarod? Fantastic. And you see how much further and further we have to slice away at these firsts to say anything meaningful. The first black trans person with a handicap to win the Iditarod. See what I'm saying? It's the year 2020. And we should celebrate people. Absolutely. Anybody who manages to become an astronaut and get to the space station should be celebrated. And getting her doctorate should... Let me start that again. Jeanette Epps getting her doctorate in aerospace engineering should be celebrated. This is a woman making not only contributions but breakthroughs to our world. Fantastic. We're going to have a woman in the White House, either in the vice president or the president's chair. Fantastic. But do we really need to go all out and celebrate? 2020 has been a heck of a year. But we're all still humans. White, black, lesbian, gay, straight, any of the non-binary genders that you choose to pick, cis, which I've never really understood that one, but no matter what you choose to be it. No matter what you choose to do it. And if you need something to give yourself pride, just go on the internet. There's somebody out there who's doing what you're doing. Maybe you can do it better. Maybe you can use them as a role model. Maybe you can even make a movie about them to celebrate their accomplishments. They don't have to be the first. Again, the fetishization of the first doesn't mean the best. It just simply means you were there first. Once again, 2020 has been a strange year, and it's going to continue to get stranger. We've only got a month and a bit left. Hold in there, everybody. But remember, don't sit and stare at the TV complaining these are not the shows that you're used to. Go out there. Make a change. Go on YouTube to check it out. There's channels for everybody with everything you can imagine. Go to Amazon. There's books for everything that you can imagine. If you don't like YouTube or Amazon, there's Barnes & Noble. There's all sorts of streaming sites across the world. There are alternatives where you can find whatever you need to validate yourself. And that's what it's all about. It's validating a small percentage of the community. We should be proud of who we are, whatever we happen to do in life, as long as we're trying to be good and trying to be a good citizen and not trying to make trouble. Hey, knock yourself out. But it's disheartening for me to see doublespeak and double entendres and careful wording being used to substitute in for genuine achievement. Nancy Pelosi, if she gets in, will have achieved something remarkable. Does it matter she's a woman? Not really. Matters to me she's competent to do the job. Kamala Harris, she gets in, will have done something incredible. Does it matter to me she's a woman? No. Matters to me that she can do the job. Janet Epps, when she gets up to the International Space Station, I have every bit of confidence in her ability to do that job. She's better qualified than I am by a long shot. I couldn't even match up to her playing chess. She deserves to be celebrated, not because of what she looks like, but because of the incredible things these three human beings have accomplished. And it's time to stop trying to push labels on things, because the second that we label something, it becomes something other people can point at. So let's celebrate the fact that we are going out into the stars. We're breaking new ground, but we have to fortify that. There should be no quotas. There should be no sitting down here and saying, oh, well, we need 20% to be of this population, 10% of that population. No. The best qualified should always be the ones that come through. That being said, we need to find out why there aren't more highly qualified minorities, because I know they exist. I've talked to them. I've sat down and had a drink with them, whether it be tea, coffee, or something a little more intoxicating. I know they're out there. But the question is why they are not choosing to pursue to the same level that other people are. And is it just a matter of inspiring them by showing them Superman in drag? Or do we need to look at ourselves as a society and say, pop culture and pop music isn't doing it? We need to find real ways to inspire everybody, whether they're race, creed, or color, it doesn't matter. Everybody should always be reaching for the top. A long way to get to that little message of hope. I hope you stayed with me. As I said before, the Silverlight Show is now going to be 2 times a week on the Life Online Radio Network. Our usual Saturday show, recorded as it's being now, and live on Tuesday night. Tuesday, 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Please feel free during that time, or even before, send us a tweet with any questions, anything you want, at Silverlight Live on Twitter. That's at Silverlight Live. If you don't have Twitter, silverlightservices@gmail.com is always open for any of your questions and comments. We thank you for listening. We look forward to hearing from you. And thank you to all. Have a great day.